The night was cold, and the desert wind carried the smell of gunpowder and blood as Samuel Drake pressed his back against a jagged rock outcrop, his fingers trembling around the worn stock of his rifle, the moonlight catching on the sweat that ran down his weather-beaten face, and across the canyon floor 2 towering figures stumbled into the open, their breaths ragged, their steps heavy as though the very earth quivered beneath them, and behind them came the echo of hooves and shouted curses from armed men who meant only death. In that instant, Samuel, a poor rancher with nothing left but a tired horse, a struggling ranch, and the love he bore his young son, had to decide, ride away into safety, or step forward and stand against overwhelming odds to defend 2 giant Apache sisters whose fate would change the valley forever. And I ask you now, if it were your choice, what would you have done? This tale begins in Arizona's San Pedro Valley, where the jagged Dragoon Mountains carved shadows against the endless desert, and the little town of Tres Palmas stood stubbornly against the wind and dust, its streets no more than rutted dirt, its buildings leaning wooden frames bleached by sun and storm, its people hard and wary, for life on this frontier was not for the faint-hearted. Samuel Drake lived 3 miles outside Tres Palmas on a modest patch of land hemmed in by mesquite and rattlesnakes, his ranch a scatter of sagging fence posts, a crumbling barn, and a herd of cattle so lean they looked like ghosts in the moonlight. Samuel's wife, Maria, had died 2 winters ago from fever, and since then he had raised his son Tommy alone, clinging to the dream that one day the ranch would be strong enough to pass down. But debts circled him like vultures, every drought, tightening the noose, every lost calf another nail in his hopes. Folks pitied him, sure, but most whispered that Samuel Drake was a man finished. Yet Samuel refused to quit. Each dawn he rose with the same stubborn fire, telling himself that if he could endure one more day, perhaps the land would turn kinder. It was on such a night of despair that he encountered Ayoka and Lenmana, the daughters of an Apache chief, women of impossible stature, each near 8 feet tall, their hair long and black as ravens' wings, their faces stern yet proud even under cuts and bruises, and Samuel could hardly breathe at the sight of them. Behind them came 6 mounted raiders, guns spitting fire, their laughter cruel, and Samuel's decision came like a spark in dry grass. He leveled his rifle, fired into the night, and bought the sisters enough time to break free. Bullets whined past his ears as the 3 of them fled into the sagebrush, stumbling through dust and darkness until the shouts of their pursuers faded into silence. At dawn, Samuel finally saw them clearly, their bodies battered but unbowed, and he felt as though legends from some ancient story had stepped into his broken world. They told him their names, Ahyoka meaning she brought happiness, Lenmana meaning flute girl, though there was little music in their voices. They had been taken by outlaws who traded captives for whiskey and rifles, and though their strength was unmatched, surprise and numbers had bound them. Samuel listened, torn between fear of what harboring them meant and awe at their spirit. Still, he took them to his ranch, hiding them in the old barn that smelled of hay and rusted tools. Tommy's eyes grew wide when he saw them, and though, frightened, the boy whispered, "Pa, are they angels?" Samuel hushed him, but the thought lingered. By midday, word had spread in Tres Palmas that Samuel was seen fleeing into the night, and tongues wagged. The marshal, a man named Carson whose loyalty bent with coin, rode up and warned Samuel plain, "You hand 'em over, Drake, and maybe your debts disappear. Keep 'em, and you'll swing." Samuel stood silent, his heart torn. Betray them, and save his land, or protect them and risk it all. That night drums rolled across the valley, low and haunting, a sound like thunder that shook the air. From the darkness came warriors, painted faces gleaming, their shadows long in the fire they carried. Ahyoka and Lenmana stepped forward, their towering forms framed by the flames, and Samuel realized their people had come. At the center rode a chief, older but proud, his gaze sharp as flint, his presence commanding silence. He studied Samuel, then spoke in measured words, "You saved my daughters, now you will hear my decision." Samuel's breath caught, for whatever came next would seal his fate. The chief's judgment, however, was not what Samuel expected. Instead of thanks or threats, he spoke of balance. "This land," he said, "bleeds because men like wolves take without giving. You saved blood of mine. For that, I owe you a debt. But debts carry weight, and your choice will bind more than your own life." Samuel's mind reeled as the chief offered him a place among them, protection for his ranch, even strength in battle. But the cost was allegiance, a bond that would pit him against many of his own kind. For days tension grew. Tres Palmas whispered of Samuel's betrayal. Raiders returned demanding the sisters. His ranch became a fortress, the barn a sanctuary. Each night Samuel stood guard, his rifle heavy, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. Ahyoka and Lenmana, though wounded, grew stronger, their presence both comfort and burden. They spoke of honor, of the spirits of the mountains, of battles fought in silence. Samuel listened, learning their courage, feeling his heart shift from fear to respect. Yet danger mounted. One night the outlaws struck again, setting fire to the pasture, flames devouring dry grass, smoke choking the sky. Samuel fought beside the sisters, their giant silhouettes cutting through the inferno, their strength saving cattle and child alike. The raiders fled, but the message was clear. The valley would not let Samuel stand neutral. At the midpoint of this tale, Samuel realized the truth. He could no longer dream of quiet survival. His ranch was not merely a patch of land, it had become the ground where two worlds clashed. And his choice, whether to bind with the Apaches or betray them, would ripple across the valley like fire in dry brush. From there the conflicts only deepened. Tres Palmas branded him a traitor. Men he once called neighbors turned their backs. Even Tommy faced jeers when he ventured into town. A neighbor, Elias Granger, a man Samuel had once helped mend a roof, spat in his path and muttered, "Ain't no place for snake lovers here." Yet in the barn, Samuel saw a different vision, his son laughing as Lenmana taught him to carve, a flute, a hyoka telling stories of rivers that sang, and for the first time since Maria's death, Samuel felt life's weight lift. Still, the danger sharpened. The marshal returned with soldiers demanding Samuel hand over the sisters. Guns gleamed in the sun, tension thick as rope. Samuel's hand shook on his rifle, his heart torn between blood and honor. Then, in a sudden cry, Tommy ran to a hyoka, clinging to her like kin. The sight froze Samuel's will. He raised his rifle, voice steady at last. These women stay. Shots rang. Dust rose. Battle erupted. The ranch became a storm of smoke, fire, and cries. Samuel fought with desperation, the sisters with fury. The ground quaked under their strides. Bullets splintered wood. Flames licked the barn. Smoke turned, day to night. Samuel nearly fell when a bullet grazed his shoulder, and for a breath the world slowed. The sound of Tommy screaming, Lenmana's massive hand pulling the boy aside just as a shot tore through the air, the barn door shattering. Samuel's rage lit like dry tinder, and with a hyoka beside him he surged forward, their defiance scattering men twice their number. In the end, when smoke cleared, soldiers lay scattered, the marshal fled, and the valley silent, but for the crackle of dying fire. Samuel stood bloodied, exhausted yet unbroken, and the chief returned. His eyes weighed the scene, then he spoke again. "You chose honor over fear. You are bound to us now, and we to you." The decision shocked Samuel. He was no longer simply a poor rancher. He had become a man tied to giants, his ranch a bridge between worlds. The town would never forgive. The frontier would never rest, but in his heart Samuel felt a strange peace, as if Maria herself approved. The days that followed brought rebuilding. The barn rose again, stronger. Cattle grazed under watchful eyes. The sisters healed, their laughter rare but real. Tommy grew with pride, his flute song drifting on desert winds. Samuel knew hardship would return, but he also knew he was no longer alone. For in choosing to protect, he had found a family larger than blood, a strength greater than land, and a legacy that would outlive drought or debt. And so the tale closes on a valley scarred yet alive, where one man's choice shaped destinies, where giants walked beside a rancher, and where honor meant more than survival. Thank you for watching this story. And if it stirred something within you, make sure to subscribe to Western Stories for more unforgettable tales of courage, sacrifice, and the untamed frontier. Tell me, what would you have done if you were Samuel Drake? Betray the sisters to save your ranch or risk everything to protect them? Share your thoughts below and ride with us again, because the West is filled with stories still waiting to be told.